Everyone jolted up at an emergency ping that rattled through the switchboard. All fleets, be advised, the unknown contact is human. As the raging battle spread across the galaxy, the scanners began to signal a new and unexpected warp signature. Alien admirals froze. Humanity, so often dismissed, had now deployed its first proper warship to the galactic battlefield. For more than a decade, the galaxy had been teetering on the edge of broad-scale collapse. Star systems that had once been awash in commerce sparkled with the debris of broken fleets. The war had begun as a simple border dispute between two powerful alien factions, but it had devolved into a multi-pronged cataclysm. Competing alliances fought for control, and once busy lines of transit had become littered with abandoned warships and rogue mines. Planets changed hands so regularly that their residents lost a sense of which empire owned them. In the midst of all this cosmic turmoil, hardware and flesh, there was us, dwarf species at the edge of the galaxy, too low-tech and too irrelevant to feature in the plans of the warring factions. While human explorers had established contact with a number of alien civilizations, Earth was viewed as a low-priority curiosity. Its people were skilled in the arts of diplomacy, trade, and scientific inquiry, but didn't have the military might of the Titans like the Mazzari Dominion or Orntella Imperium. The Terran Confederation, as humanity's consolidated government was known, concentrated for decades on defensive preparations and on establishing economic alliances of mutual benefit, thereby giving them a pass on most of the bloody territorial conquests that consumed the galaxy. All of that changed when the conflict spiraled out of any rational containment. Fueled with gravitic weaponry, the Orntella Imperium took 4 to 6 neutral worlds, only to be met with the retaliation of the Mazzari Dominion and its allies. The ensuing standoff triggered a cascade of clashes that quickly devolved into open war. Dozens of lesser species were caught up, forced to take sides or face extinction. Humanity looked on anxiously from the sidelines, not knowing how long their diplomatic neutrality would spare them. At the heart of this titanic conflict, however, was the all-important battle that loomed near the Kelrath sector, a resource-heavy area coveted by every major faction. Dumb crystalline asteroids floated there, rumored to be the key to next-gen reactors. The side that held Kelrath could well shift the balance of all-out war. Fleets descended from all corners, a swirling maelstrom of drawling tension. On the other, the Orntella armadas held their fearsome gravitic cannons aloft, ready to scour the any who stood in their way from existence. On the other, a coalition led by the Mazzari Dominion had poised gargantuan carriers and destroyers tipped with plasma arrays. Neutral powers circled at the fringes, unsure to advance or retreat. As these forces gathered, rumor ran that a mysterious new actor would arrive. Tales of esoteric war vessels being readied by a fringe race that had never willingly participated in galactic skirmishes were whispered among spy networks and intelligence services. The majority of admirals ignored the chatter. Entire civilizations had folded under the might of Orntella and Mazzari fleets after all. What difference could a few backwater species make? Earth's shipyards, though limited, had been laboring for years on a covert project. Under the guiding eye of the Terran Confederation, humanity's scientists and engineers had thrown their efforts into the creation of a true capital ship, the Horizon Spear. They used every advantage they had: fusion-pumped quantum drives, secure interlinking nanoweave plating, next-gen laser lance turrets, all cut from Earth's latest and greatest research. The Terran government knew that as long as they sat on the sidelines, eventually war would make its way to them. They'd choose to be part or be part by force. The alternative was to guarantee that humanity would not be easy to conquer. And so was born the Horizon Spear, a ship built to prove that Earth wasn't just a tiny footnote in the business of the galaxy. But within the Terran High Command, there was disagreement. Others warned that dispatching just one warship into the middle of the largest conflict in recorded history was pushing it. But others said humanity had to show its resolve, forming alliances or at least showing that it could defend itself. Planet Earth had little choice. The war was heating up, and the resources of the Kelrath sector were just too precious to let go unclaimed. If humanity didn't act now, it would be eclipsed for all time by the grand powers who would undoubtedly carve the rest of the galaxy to their liking. On the Horizon Spear, tensions lingered dormant behind closed doors. A seasoned officer with a keen sense of intuition, Captain Isadora Fane had been selected to lead the Terran Confederation's maiden venture into the realm of a proper frontline warship. Her taciturn second-in-command, Commander Elias Rune, had come from smaller patrol craft serving the Confederation's border defense. The rest of the key officers were a mix of veterans and bright-eyed new recruits, coalesced around a singular mission: show slavers and raiders that humanity's a force to be reckoned with in a galaxy burning. And out there among the swirling chaos of the Kelrath sector, alien admirals from the Orntella Imperium and the Mazzari Dominion readied for their greatest clash to date. Some had heard vague rumors in the distance, but they had no idea that a human warship was on its way. Admiral Zevn of the Mazzari Dominion, a great shape with bioluminescent lines through his crest, laughed at the idea that Earth could affect the war. As he famously told his staff, "We have destroyed entire armadas. Even if these humans can scrape up one warship, it is a mere fleck against our power." Across the galactic plane, Orntella warlord Kenrax looked upon the Battle of Kelrath and saw an opportunity to annihilate the Mazzari once and for all. Rumors about Terrans seldom reached his ears, but even had they, Kenrax was certain any fresh competitor would just represent the next opportunity to gloat. Thus, the stage was set. Waves of cruisers, carriers, and dreadnoughts took position throughout the Kelrath sector, preparing for a clash that would settle control over priceless assets, and, quite possibly, the fate of the entire war. As these behemoths battled, humanity's Horizon Spear embarked on its maiden voyage. Stealth drives kept the ship hidden on scanners until the last approach. If they succeeded, Earth's economy and security could take its place among other satisfying balances of power, and if they failed, they might be overshadowed forever by battling powers. If they succeeded, humanity would find a place at the table of galactic titans, either welcome or feared, but never again ignored. In the hours leading up to the battle, the Terran crew braced for an onslaught like they had never faced before. Captain Fane glared from the main console on the bridge, her reflection in the glass a portrait of grim purpose mixed with a flash of nervous thrill in her eye. She continued over the intercom. "This is our moment. The galaxy is watching, even if it involves them. Let's show them that we are not simply spectators to this war. We are players." It was with that rallying cry that the Horizon Spear dropped out of FTL transit, coming straight towards the Kelrath sector itself. The Kelrath sector boiled with activity as the Orntella and Mazzari fleets prepared for what would be a climactic engagement. Dozens of warships shimmered in the light of the sector's twin suns, each faction telegraphing a well-practiced sense of overwhelming force. Orntella ships preferred jagged hull designs that exploited gravitational fields to generate propulsion and weaponry, making them infamously agile and deadly in close quarters. The Mazzari ships, on the other hand, were swift and symmetrical, armed with cutting-edge plasma cannons and a veritable cornucopia of shielding technology. The power blocks lined up behind the two giants, and smaller factions fluttered in between, anxious to see whether to join or remain on the edges. Meanwhile, neutral bystanders and opportunistic scavengers dwelled in the disarray, searching for any edge. It breathed with the electric intensity of the vacuum felt in the air. Then suddenly, a new warp signature flared on long-range sensors. Operators aboard both the Orntella and the Mazzari flagships reported an unidentified approach. They were perplexed by the readings. This was not one of the known factions, nor did it resemble any captured Archelon vessels from prior wars. And scrambling to understand the data, alien admirals began to become restless. Some suspected that a secret alliance had sent reinforcements. Others spoke in hushed tones about a purported new species, but nearly all ruled out the likelihood that it could be the humans. For millennia, after all, Earth's standing in the galactic neighborhood had been more observer than player. That widespread doubt hovered over, but the reality suddenly cleared the moment the Horizon Spear came into visual range. Though smaller than the largest dreadnoughts, it was far from small. The hull bristled with turret emplacements, and the soft glow of advanced shield generators shimmered along its perimeter. It was a shock to then Orntella and Mazzari fleets, the realization that they had completely underestimated Earth's potential. It was Admiral Zevn of the Mazzari Dominion who first confirmed the readings, "It's Terran." I never felt they had the technology to build something of this scale. For a brief time, the conflict held at bay, if only because the arrival of a new contender made everyone's battle plans a jumble. The Orntella opened the proceedings with a volley of magically out-of-control gravitic torpedoes aimed at the Horizon Spear, as if probing this strange warship to see what it could do. The human vessel responded rapidly, turning its broadside and blasting out a precision volley of laser lance fire, half of the torpedoes being destroyed mid-flight. The rest hammered against the Horizon Spear's shields, creating a visible ripple but nothing that broke through. On the Horizon Spear's bridge, Captain Fane stood with her hands clasped behind her back, her posture settling into locked firmness. "Commander Rune, reallocate power to the forward lances. Show these Orntella that we do not go down easy." Her command burst through the static of a strained crew. Bright beams of coherent energy flashed from the warship's main turrets within moments. They pierced through space, impacting the foremost Orntella frigates with enough force to drive them apart in a flail of evasive movements. Once scoffing aliens hit emergency thrusters, trying to avoid being vaporized by a volley they never saw coming. On board the command vessels of the Orntella Imperium, there was confusion. Nobody had known that human beings could put a solid warship in the field that could stand up to their advanced gravitic weaponry. This time Warlord Kenrax, who was in the ancient throne with his unyielding confidence, gave a direct order to crush the intruder as a display of power. "Destroy the Terran ship," he bellowed over the comms, ordering entire squadrons of gunships to charge at the newcomer in a blind fury. Meanwhile, the Mazari Dominion watched with increasing interest. Admiral Zevn reasoned that if the Orntella were preoccupied with this new rival, then the time might be right for a decisive blow. He ordered his cruisers to shell the Orntella formation from another angle. It turned into a chaotic, multi-way slugging match, with blast waves and torpedoes overlapping in a deadly lattice. But amid the twisting rays and distending hulls, the Horizon Spear continued to loom an unexpected fulcrum. Used by its crew advanced sensor arrays that merged known alien scanning technology with the human eccentricity for good measure, it could respond quickly than conventional warships. No one tried to overextend. No one got lost in an entrapment zone. Every barrage tactical too, with surgical scrutiny, Commander Rune at the helm. To galactic norms, their strategy was unconventional. They sacrificed some capability for the sake of rapid engagement, using jamming pods to confuse targeting locks and then executing pinpoint strikes onto key enemy systems. One by one, the Orntella frigates failed under sustained bombardment, their gravitic hull plating tearing off. Buoyed by the Terran's success and capitalizing on the confusion, Mazari destroyers surged ahead. Other smaller factions, meanwhile, saw an opportunity for a retreat or to pick off stragglers. Wars are not marches, and the introduction of new technology can disrupt centuries of entrenched tactics. In this case, the entire shape of the battle changed when the human warship showed up. On Warlord Kenrax's flagship, the Orntella, he scowled. He called for an all-out assault. Pin them, crush their shields. A volley of gravitic cannons fired a volley of wrath that broke against the Horizon Spear and nearly twisted its shield generators into the red. Alarms shrieked in the Terran bridge. Flashes of light crated the hull as energy buffers strained to hold. "Engineering status." Captain Fane barked, her usual cool cracking just a bit. Chief Engineer Soren Graves replied over the comm. "Shields are at 80%. We are pushing hard with the gravitic displacements. We cannot do this forever." Tension climbed. If the Orntella and Mazari all opened fire at the same moment upon the Horizon Spear, sheer volume of fire would overwhelm the humans. Assessing the danger, Captain Fane gave orders for a surprise counterattack. She ordered her helmsman to turn the ship down a narrow pass between two of the drifting asteroids, alive with the resource-rich crystals. These formations, which are known to reflect certain scanning frequencies, provided some degree of coverage to the Horizon Spear. As the Orntella maneuvered in a vain attempt to avoid the asteroids and keep it line of sight, the Terrans took the momentary reprieve to charge their shields and devise a daring counteroffensive. Now, with that whirling storm of conflict, the alien warships that had once dismissed the Terran presence now chased or were chased by the Horizon Spear. In urgent messages, Admirals exchanged frantic notes. Note: their engine output is out of this world. Our targeting solutions continue to scramble. They shouldn't be allowed to maneuver like that. However, the Terran ship fooled them, employing clever hit-and-run tactics. The rest of the battlefield devolved into a cacophony of alliances of convenience and betrayals, as each faction realized that humanity's sudden emergence was a dangerous wild card they could no longer afford to ignore. But the cost was starting to add up for the Terrans as well. Every encounter consumed valuable stores of ammunition. Firing the laser lances in rapid succession built up so much heat that it taxed the coolant systems, and without careful monitoring, it was not unheard of for them to melt down. The corridors inside the Horizon Sphere were lit only by emergency strips of amber light, as crews of engineers routed power away from less critical decks. Structural creaks rippled across the hull as Orntella weapons rattled gravity. The human warship, mighty as it may have been, was not invulnerable. At last, an Orntella warship had taken an ideal shot, charging a gravitic lance to fire straight into the Terran reactor core. Realizing they were in trouble, Captain Fane ordered a full reverse thruster burn to pivot out of the line of fire. The lance impacted the aft area of the Horizon Sphere, opening a temporary breach which forced the ship's crew to seal off segments of the vessel. Commander Rune received casualty reports, dozens injured, a few missing. The grim reality of war hit home. For some Terran officers, the thrill of demonstrating their species' value came crashing into the grim truth that every volley had an expensive human price tag. Shortly thereafter, the Mazzari Dominion took advantage of the Orntella distraction to deploy their largest dreadnoughts. Admiral Zevn fired plasma bombardments at the Orntella flank. The twisted wrecks drifted through the Kelrath sector, swirling in the shimmering crystals. A few canny Orntella captains attempted to outflank the Mazzari, but the tide had turned. Now the whole battle rested on whether the Terrans could hold the Orntella in check long enough for the Mazzari to land a knockout blow, or whether the Orntella could wipe out the humans quickly enough to turn back to their old adversary. In the spaces between these grand factions, other, smaller species had fought brief skirmishes or pulled back entirely, unwilling to be caught in the crossfire of uncontainable new forces. Pirate bands and mercenaries that once roamed battlefields like scavengers now suddenly found themselves irrelevant, unsure whether to align themselves for the slaughter or just fade into cosmic dust. Captain Fane gathered her senior officers for a short but tense strategy meeting in the war room of the Terran warship. The swirls of engagement flickered on a projection of the sector from one of the Orntella ships crashing against the Terrans to the Mazzari, seeming on the cusp of a breakthrough elsewhere. Our best hope, she concluded, is to force the Orntella into overcommitting. We'll get them from a vector they don't see coming. If we hold, they'll collapse into the Mazzari's last thrust. Then perhaps we can agree on something close to acceptance with the Mazzari, if they don't double back on us next. Commander Rune nodded, but his eyes darted with concern. Captain, if they turn on us once the Orntella are done, we'll be absolutely swarmed. We should be flexible, be willing to leap out if necessary. But Captain Fane shook her head adamantly. This is our message to the galaxy. We did not travel all this way to skedaddle as soon as we tip the scales of power. We'll hold our ground and prove to them all that humanity isn't some momentary fluke or irritation. Having settled that, the Horizon Sphere prepared for their next engagement. They had survived the first waves, but the far greater question remained. Could one Terran warship make really so much of a difference in the fate of a war that had scarred the cosmos for eons? The bridge fell silent when sensors began detecting a new Orntella assault wing converging with their position. Captain Fane breathed in slowly and evenly. She fixed her gaze on the flickering tactical display, observing as the bright icons representing Orntella battleships moved into proximity. Let them come, she said, quietly but with fierce resolve. We'll respond to their challenge, and then we will stake our claim in this galaxy. A loud exchange of firepower marked the beginning of the next phase of the battle. The humans, meanwhile, fought with relentless resolve, scrambling around hails of gravitic pulses. Aliens who had brushed them aside as Banal scurried to launch coordinated attacks. Yet again and again, the Horizon Sphere countered them with cunning tactics that exploited speed, sophisticated jamming, precise targeting of weak points. A few battered, dazed Orntella ships slid out of the way, leaving their lines exposed for punishing strikes by the Mazzari. The humans weren't unscathed despite that success. Parts of the ship glowed ominously, with intermittent blackout due to power circuits exceeding their capacity, mandating Chief Engineer Graves to make emergency reroutes. Casualty figures mounted. Medical bays overflowed with the wounded. Captain Fane herself had nearly collapsed from exhaustion after having declined all reprieve from the command seat. Outside, the angry war raged on, with no signs of abatement. The hulks of starships drifted like silent tombs, glimmering with the evanescent shimmer of the Kelrath crystals. The swirl of debris became so thick that navigators had to compute safe paths in real time or risk ramming into mangled wreckage. With each new kill shot that struck, an expanding fireball erupted as compartments vented atmosphere, the quiet dark consuming entire crews in seconds. Through it all, the human warship survived, scarred, bruised, yet unbroken. Word got around among Orntella and Mazzari formations alike. We can't afford to ignore these Terrans. No one, not even alien admirals who had once sneered at Earth for its cowardly withdrawal behind protective walls, could deny the truth. The Horizon Spear would likely settle the outcome of the greatest war in generations. Triumph or tragedy, humanity was leaving its mark. And so, in the bloody belly of the Kelrath sector, the last crescendo began. Though the Orntella Imperium had been beaten to a pulp, it was far from out, and the majority of the warships still active were sent on a desperate charge. They knew their attempts to bat the Terran craft aside had been unsuccessful, and that the Mazzari Dominion was taking every advantage of a mistake. Desperate and mad with Warlord Kenrax's savage inspiration, the Orntella had heaved their bruised fleets into a wedge formation, bent on driving through all resistance in one deadly stroke. For their part, the Mazzari charged ahead with new vigor. Their carriers sent forth dozens of swarms of graceful fighters, pounding Orntella picket vessels to break a hole in the lines. Victory was nigh. Admiral Zevn thought, while also being aware of the complication the Terran wildcard could represent. The humans had already upended both sides' strategies. The second note also pointed out that if the Horizon Spear pitted their will against the Mazzari at a critical point, the Mazzari's two-front advantages could also fall apart. Zevn waffled on opening diplomatic channels, then drove on laser-focused on crushing the Orntella, betting the Terrans would get out of the way eventually. But, unbeknownst to Orntella and the Mazzari leaders, Captain Fane had a bolder scheme in mind. She'd studied the Orntella wedge formation and had immediately identified a weakness. Its apex was well protected by coplanar gravitic fields that overlapped dynamically, but its rear elements were overextended, especially after their repeated engagements. If the wedge could be penetrated from behind, an irreparable chain reaction could be triggered that would split the Orntella formation, allowing the Mazzari to mop them up. But this maneuver would come with high risks. The humans would have to round the flank, taking the long, dangerous route through a bristling asteroid cluster filled with deadly crystal shards. Not explored territory, chock full of floating debris that could rip a ship apart. And should they materialize at just the wrong moment, then the Orntella might direct all their weaponry at the Horizon Spear, rending it to pieces well before any reinforcements reached it. Yet it was the most indisputable road to making the Orntella's fate sealed and humanity's strategic genius known on the galactic stage. Captain Fane convened her officers. Emergency power relays dimmed the bridge, the tang of burning electronics polluting the recycled air. Engineers scrambled to patch hull breaches. Medics ran back and forth carrying triage kits. Amidst the chaos, an electric feeling of togetherness knitted the crew together. They were well aware of what was at stake. If they could manage this gambit, Earth would no longer be just a spectator. Fane's voice broke the tension. We're taking a major risk. We'll avoid the far edge of the Kelrath crystals and approach from behind the Orntella wedge. We must time it perfectly. If we can pull it off, we'll cut their formation in two, exposing them to the Mazzari. If we lose, there will not be enough hull here to fight another minute. Commander Rune frowned. Captain, the asteroid field is infested with microsingularities. We've barely scanned it. One misstep and we're space dust. Yet the Terran officers grimly nodded. None voiced any objection. They had made it this far, and if the audacious plan was their best chance, they would go all in. Without ceremony, the Horizon spear slipped from the main fray, jammed pulses cloaking its departure. Both Orntella and Mazzari ships alike thought by then that the vessel had finally taken too large of a beating and had retreated to lick its wounds. So Warlord Kenrax, committed to exterminating the Mazzari, diverted his attention away from the Terrans. Admiral Zevn, too, concentrated on the direct attack. Amid the maelstrom of the battle, no one saw the humans duck behind a massive, cratered asteroid. For one moment, it looked like the Terrans had given up the fight. Unbeknownst to them, the Horizon spear wound its way through dangerous asteroid fields. Microsingularities flared chaotically, threatening to riven the Terran ship asunder. The crew could feel each jolt in their bones as engines struggled to stay on course. Chief Engineer Graves arranged surges of power to thrusters, skimming the edges of the gravitational anomalies by the narrowest of margins. Crystal shards, some the size of small boats, glowed eerily in the dark, reflecting sensor pings in mesmerizing but deadly patterns. Perspiration glistened on the bridge officers' foreheads. Terran navigators threw out readings clipped and urgent. At the heart of the orchestrated chaos, Captain Fane kept a singular focus on the thousands of daily steps to ensure her finely tuned plan was executed. Any miscalculation would end the expedition, and perhaps humanity's galactic dreams. In catastrophic death, the tension bore down on all of them. Finally, the asteroids broke, and there was a view looking behind the Orntella wedge formation. The Terrans watched through the major view screen as the Orntella battleships thrust and engine ports blazed hot white as they bore down on the Mazzari lines. Mazzari plasma hammered Orntella forward elements, but the wedge remained intact, bolstered by the mightiest warships of Kenrax. Outside, in the bright conflagration beyond, the Kelrath crystals glimmered like far-off gems scattered among chaos. Captain Fane steeled herself. She opened a ship-wide channel. All hands, prepare for combat. This is the final push. We hit hard and hit fast. Good luck, and remember, Earth is with us. The crew felt a wave of determination wash over them. Ratings buckled themselves into harnesses. Laser lances were readied. Gunners rechecked targeting calibrations. Engineers sealed open conduits to enable the reactor to produce more power. Setting its thrusters to full burn, the Horizon spear surged from behind the asteroid cluster with lethal grace. The Orntella wedge never knew what had hit it. In mere moments, the Terran warship was on the tail end of Orntella's battleships. A new voice entered the fray. Commander Rune ordered a coordinated fire. Torpedoes hurtled after their targets. AI assisted for precision strikes. Laser lances raked the void, illuminating Orntella shield capacitors in strobing flares. Whole segments of the wedge formation collapsed with the unexpected assault. Warlord Kenrax, busy leading the wedge's front lines, realized in horror that his formation was being compromised from behind. He turned just in time to see more capital ships shredded instantaneously. Desperate to salvage the situation and maintain discipline, he barked out a string of orders, ordering any ship that could be spared to wheel about and counterattack the Terrans. But now the wedge was sandwiched between two dangers, the Horizon spear in the rear and the Mazzari dreadnoughts in front. Tasting the long-awaited opening, Admiral Zevn released a wave of plasma bombers followed by heavy cruisers. The scavengers, smacking each other from the rear, collapsed their hooves together, rupturing the Orntella vanguard. The buckled lines were broached with gaps. The wedge began to collapse. Variants had begun to explode Orntella hulls as they began a chaotically violent chaos between Terran and Mazzari. It was a masterstroke maneuver that broke them as much as it did their formation. High fives erupted throughout the Horizon spear as sensors registered the multiple kills. In total, one Orntella battleship, her reactor compromised, detonated in a violent chain reaction, scattering debris across the sector. Another floundered, without a working bridge, and drifted without direction. Captain Fane would not waste the opportunity as he urged the crew to continue their assault. Keep hitting them. Target their command ships. This, we will cement in one blow. In a final act of defiance, Warlord Kenrax had been able to gather a handful of dedicated captains to encircle the flagship of the Orntella Imperium. But the humans, buoyed by their unexpected edge, pounded away. With every volley, the Orntella ring contracted. Kenrax's voice roared across the open channels, cursing the insolent Terrans and swearing vengeance. But it was too late. A last barrage from the Horizon Spear blew up his ship's main reactor. The warlord's final roar was absorbed in the vacuum. Without their leader and with their line in ruins, the remaining Orntella commanders showed surrender or deserted the field. The great wedge that had once threatened the very cradle of Kelrath had torn itself within. Admiral Zevn wasted no time mopping up stragglers as he tightened the Mazari's grip on the contested sector. But even he could not help but wonder at the pivotal role that humanity had played. When the smoke cleared, the battlefield was littered with the wreckage of Orntella. Dozens of ships floated in silence. Mazari boats took up station around the sector, staking the territory as their own. Even through it all, the Horizon Spear hung close to the flotsam, battered and burnt but functional. Fane analyzed the damage reports. 2 turrets gone, multiple hull breaches, double-digit casualties. Losses, yes, but eclipsed by the stunning victory. The last skirmishes fizzled away, and a hush fell over the Kelrath sector. Messages crackled on quiet comms from allied or neutral vessels, cautious congratulations, or simply expressions of stunned wonder. The non-humans looked at the Terrans. And this one warship, with guile and determination, had fundamentally altered the course of the largest conflict of generations. Admiral Zevn took the unprecedented step of opening a direct line to Captain Fane, summoning her to discuss what came next. He knew that you could not ignore the humans. Back in the forming of the sectors upon realizing nothing was going to change, at least not in the immediate future, smaller factions held council. The galaxy had changed, and none felt it more acutely than those who had just watched the Horizon Spear rip apart the Orntella lines. On the bridge of the Terran warship, battered crew members let out cheers and embraced one another. Captain Fane permitted herself a brief, exultant smile. Through the ship-wide intercom, she said, "Well done, everyone. We demonstrated what Earth is capable of. Whatever happens next, we meet it equally among the stars." Commander Rune, beside her, took a deep breath. "We did it, Captain. We've changed everything." The adrenaline still flowed through him, but relief was starting to wash over him. He was aware that politics and negotiations, if not further battles, lay ahead. But for a moment, one brief, glorious moment, the Terran crew could enjoy the hard-won victory wrenched from the very teeth of galactic cosmoclism. And in the space beyond it all, the Kelrath crystals blazed on and on amidst the debris, beautiful evidence of the resources that had fed this conflict of arms and the contentious new power that had just settled its claim. The old guard had been forewarned. Humanity was no longer an afterthought. It was a power that could not be ignored, and one that the whole galaxy would need to accommodate. The effects of the Battle of Kelrath could be felt across every major star cluster. News reached them via subspace relays and hidden informants that the Orntella Imperium had suffered a devastating defeat, the result, largely, of the cunning of one Terran warship, the Horizon Spear. After the initial shock wore off, there were discussions of broader significance. If humankind could build one such craft, how many more might they be able to master? Would they build alliances or seek to be a solo superpower? On the Mazari side, Admiral Zevn made use of the collapse of Orntella to consolidate control over the Kelrath sector. He publicly acknowledged the contribution of the Terrans, noting at one point, without their intervention, the final outcome might have been very different. Behind the scenes, though, Mazari strategists debated whether Earth was the next great competitor. Not only were there drafts of offers of alliance, but also plans of contingency if the Terrans grew overbold. Smaller factions, who were hesitating to take sides, now found hope in forging an alliance with the Terran Confederation. If a world such as Earth could face down a Titan, maybe there was hope that lesser powers would be able to remain autonomous or even flourish beneath the aegis of Terran martial power. Diplomatic representatives were suddenly lining up to negotiate with Earth, hoping to convert the Terrans' newfound inclusion into mutually profitable treaties and agreements. Back aboard the Horizon Spear, celebrations mingled with solemn remembrance for the fallen. Captain Fane conducted a short memorial service for the fallen in that battle, commenting how every sacrifice had smoothed a path to the ascendance of humanity. There were tears, but also pride in the knowledge that Earth had achieved a place in the galactic pantheon. Repairs began right away, and engineers worked around the clock to patch the battered hull. The sense of accomplishment was palpable even as the crew toiled. Earth's news networks exploded into jubilation when the transmissions confirmed the Terran's success. Videos of cheering crowds in cities around the world played on the ship's monitors. Political leaders who once were hesitant to endow massive military expenditures now lauded the achievements of the crew, taking the opportunity to emphasize Earth's newfound place in a galaxy that had no choice but to take them seriously. The Terran Confederation, which had previously seemed like an afterthought, now became an important potential belligerent in the war. And the galaxy's wars went on. Despite the great defeat of the Orntella Imperium, it was not truly defeated. Other alliances rose and fell, and ruthless warlords tried to take advantage of the power vacuum left in Orntella's wake. One victory would not settle the sprawling war, but that dynamic had shifted profoundly. Terran presence became a calculating factor in every faction's planning. In the aftermath of after-action reviews, Captain Fane and Commander Rune spoke about what to do next. They knew building alliances would be vital. Earth couldn't wage war with the entire galaxy alone. Simultaneously, they would not be used as a pawn of the Mazari Dominion or any other great power. The Terrans would negotiate from a position of never-before-seen strength, and the way forward would be a compromise, to be sure, but one that would ensure survival and, with any luck at all, truly end this vicious war. And so the Horizon Spear flew ever forward, a marker of humanity's blossoming primacy. Its name spread like legend along the cosmic highways. The Terran warship was spoken of in hushed respect among mercenary captains. Academics argued over the psychology of an unknown species defeating a galactic empire. Even the Orntella diaspora moving in to reorganize beneath new leaders murmured about the day when they might take vengeance upon Earth for having toppled their formerly invulnerable wedge. For now, however, the final ruling was in. The galaxy could no longer ignore humanity. Earth had rewritten its stars on this day, proving that intelligence, adaptability, and courage could prevail even in the face of overwhelming odds. As the war blazed in faraway sectors, an undeniable truth resounded in every subspace broadcast. Humanity were here, and they were making it clear they were not for leaving.